Hi, herbalists. Let's talk about a few phrases and ways of talking about plants that are really common, especially on the web, that might give you away as someone who maybe hasn't yet learned with sort of a community of plant healers, herbalists, or others who are kind of, deep in the plants for some time. So I'm sure there are exceptions to this, I'm positive, but really, I like to say that all medicinal plant use is cultural and cultural influenced, and the way that we talk about um, the plants and using them is very culturally influenced still. And so there are some ways of talking about plants that are also very perhaps marketing influenced and that separately that are very sort of conventional medicine and Western culture influenced that are, as the kids say, a little bit cringe when you get into hanging out with or just, communicating with perhaps someone who's studied for a few years at an herb school or someone who has learned plant use culturally in their community or with, family or just local community through a lineage of use. So my biggest pet peeve, and I always just stuff my feelings about it, is the word combat. Okay, so there's actually some cultural and political reasons that combat, the use of the word combat, has become kind of a cheerleader and commonly used sort of phrase and ideology in sort of some sects of conventional medicine. And there's also a reason that you see it a lot on the web and in marketing terms, etc. And they're two separate, I want to suggest they're probably two separate reasons, but one of the reasons that that word is used a lot in marketing is that marketing of herbs and supplements, at least in the US, is not allowed to use most of the kind of medical terms that would actually describe maybe what the plant is doing physiologically. You especially cannot say, you can't use disease terms in reference to medicinal plants, or you can't say treat or cure or things of that nature. But one thing that people slip into doing instead of saying treat is saying combat, okay? And so let's get more into like what's wrong with that. Like, you may feel that that's very motivating and a strong term, etc., or it may reflect sort of how you feel about disease or a particular disease or issue. But when we talk about plants, or when we talk about medicinal plants combating a disease, you're kind of putting that disease in sort of the spotlight, and you're putting the sort of whole like feeling of the approach is just sort of a violent action against something, okay? And so a lot of herbal schools have been for a long time teaching that you want to speak in terms of either supporting the person you may be working with, or supporting a person, or supporting a particular healthy function of the body, okay? Or be a little more plant centric. Like, what are some of the physiological actions that this plant might encourage or support? And then you can get a little bit more specific. It's okay to, let's be real. We do sometimes have to get a little more specific or talk about a plant's use in reference to a disease, or else people might just kind of not understand you. But that word combat is used a lot in marketing. It's used a lot if, in conventional medicine, talking about particular, epidemics, etc. But there are always many ways of expressing kind of an idea and a goal. And so, among a lot of herbalists and alternative health practitioners, holistic health practitioners, or enthusiasts, if you can talk about supporting a person, supporting a healthy physiological function, or even, get a little more specific into the physiology, if you're trying to work against something, what is it you're trying to work against? Are you trying to reduce proliferation of a certain cell type, or excretion of a certain inflammatory compound, or modulate sort of hormone release or conversion, that kind of thing? So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Maybe you'll just be a little bit more aware of it if you're writing blogs or if you're talking with others. The thing is, it's the kind of word that can come out of your mouth really easily, and probably most people won't say anything to you about it. But if you're in a community of maybe I'm a Western herbalist, more or less. That's mostly how I've learned medicinal plants, is working with people who maybe have herb schools and practice, and working with naturopathic doctors. So to say combat can be really cringe if you're in a group of people who, or with someone who's got a little bit perhaps more nuanced cultural background of learning. And I mean cultural in any sense, like including just holistic health in sort of the Western sort of cultural climate. Okay. All right. So that's the main one. Other things are, it follows a little bit with that, is, and this one is harder to get away from doing, and I'd say it's a little bit more of a continuum, or just be a little bit more just mindful of it maybe. But saying that an herb or a plant is for blank disease, well, we're going to say that sometimes. People often are a little impatient and want to just get the statement and the reassurance of what they have heard or read, or is this plant going to possibly be helpful for them. But if you are writing about plants or talking about plants and it's always this is for that, maybe try to talk a little bit more about the how or why. That can be really helpful, because if you're talking with someone in conventional medicine, that might go over okay with them, but they might want to see that you and hear that you have a little bit more context for what are the different factors or causes in a particular issue, health issue or disease. But also, hundreds of plants are used for any disease, some useful, some not. Some useful for particular individuals and causes of a health issue, and some not. So if you can say a little bit more about how and why a particular plant is of interest in a particular health issue, you're probably going to be more successful with, if you're working with people for their health issues, you're going to be more successful than just applying dotted line approach, because different plants for any disease can have very many different sorts of actions, strengths, way of supporting a person with that health concern, etc. Okay. What else could I throw in there? So those are probably my main two. Maybe the third one is leaping to either fad plants or plants that are stronger than they need to be. And these aren't the same usually. Like a lot of fad currently popular plants in like media, TikTok, etc., could be pretty gentle, maybe nutritional, and that's, maybe a positive in that if they are being sort of recommended to and consumed by many people, perhaps less likely to cause harm. But if you're serious about learning medicinal plants, I would try to learn, get a little bit deeper and more specific, because often what happens is whatever's popular at the moment, it is attributed to helping with like practically every health condition. And it might be that there's some connection, some cultural use, etc., but it might not be like the most, it might not be the best pick for certain uses, okay? Um, and then the other is thinking about or talking about plants that are maybe way too strong for like beginner issues. So that's another thing, is that sometimes people learn just a small handful of plants and latch onto those, without having or they hear of something. Let's say they hear of something, and some reference book perhaps says that is used for a certain disease. Well, that might be like more like traditional users who have a ton of assessment criteria and experience and specific preparations for that plant. And it might be not so beginner friendly. Okay, so if you're talking about plants that are like low dose botanicals and you don't know that many plants overall, that's a bit of both a red flag and also a bit scary, that you might get yourself into real safety trouble. So it's appealing to know many, many, many plants, and it's appealing to know those low dose botanicals. I love them. They are kind of my favorite from like just an angle of like sparking excitement and interest, and I have used some of them, many of them. But after like 5 years of studying and clinical supervised practice and first aid supervised practice, and it's going to be a seldom, it's going to be a really seldom type of instance that you might use those. So all herbal teachers I've learned with really, teach a wide range of strengths of plants, but really, really emphasize use the gentle ones first. Learn the gentle ones really well. When approaching a health issue, if approaching a health issue, start, well, except for maybe like an actual emergency, a situation, start with the gentlest plants. And that can be for common acute issues and common chronic issues, especially. Start with the gentlest of plants. See if there's a response. If not, you can work your way up. So that's maybe a selling point for learning the plants in context to each other, which is something that studying with an herbalist, or studying in a community of herbalists, or a community of traditional users of plants, just having some community of learning with someone who's got some more experience than you, and learn from someone with more experience than them initially, that can really help your contextual use and communication about plants. It can maybe help your cultural communication about plants, and it can help you have a safer and perhaps even more effective experience if you do venture into using plants for yourself or people close to you. Okay, thanks, herbalists.